Hello and welcome to another experimental video series by aReNGee. Over the past few years, challenge runs have become a popular gaming video genre. In a challenge run, the YouTuber tries to beat a game under a certain set of restrictions which they specify at the beginning of the video. I've taken this concept and attempted to adapt it to work with the Eternal card game. Of course, most challenge runs are performed on single-player games, while Eternal is an online multiplayer game. Fortunately, Eternal is stocked with a robust set of player versus environment game modes, and to avoid any of the potential issues with online player versus player matches, I've chosen to do all of my initial challenge runs exclusively in the Gauntlet mode. For this initial video, the challenge will be to win a Gauntlet match without spending any power whatsoever. Before we begin this challenge run, let's specify the rule set that we're going to use. The Gauntlet challenges you to beat 7 computer opponents who increase in difficulty as you progress, culminating in a Gauntlet boss that uses a special rule set. Once you defeat that Gauntlet boss, the entire Gauntlet will increase in difficulty. I'm going to do this particular challenge using the lowest Gauntlet difficulty setting, both because, that's where my Gauntlet already was when I started this challenge, but also because I'm definitely going to need this lower difficulty when we get to the other, more complicated challenges. Completing a Gauntlet run will permanently increase your Gauntlet difficulty, and you would need to wait for the next set release in order to reset it back down. So for the moment, I will be sticking only to challenge runs that require a single victory, rather than attempting to clear the Gauntlet in its entirety. Next, let's clarify what the challenge run means when it says, without spending any power. For the purposes of this challenge run, any card that causes my current power to decrease for any reason is banned. This includes casting cards by spending power, as you normally would in a regular game of Eternal, or spending power on Twist, Ultimates, or similar abilities. Conversely, everything that does not cause my power to decrease is totally allowed. This includes causing my current or maximum power to increase, such as by gaining current power at the start of a turn, which means that playing both depleted and undepleted power cards is allowed for this challenge. Obviously, the majority of the cards in Eternal cost power to cast, so this is going to limit my options to free spells, power cards, and a couple of other mechanics that are unique to Eternal. As with any other game of Eternal, before we can leap directly into battle, we're going to need to first build our deck. There are 2 main ways that you can win a game in Eternal. You can reduce the opponent's health to 0, or you can run their deck out of cards. With this particular challenge run locking out the majority of the cards in the game, decking the opponent did not seem like the wisest strategy, so I went with the former game plan. With that in mind, I started building the deck around Sand Warrior, which is a 0-cost 3/3. As a 0-cost card, we can cast it without spending any power, so it does not violate the challenge, and a 3/3 is larger than the majority of the units that the lowest Gauntlet difficulty decks can actually play. So for the most part, it's going to be able to beat down unchecked. Unfortunately, Sand Warrior is more or less our only real option as far as 0-cost units go in Eternal. The only other option is Helpful Doorbot, which is a 0/3, and as such can't really attack. Without any alternative units to really fall back on, my game plan for this challenge run was Sand Warrior Beatdown. As we'll see in future videos, this wasn't actually our only option for this kind of run, and there's a number of other options, but for this particular challenge, I stuck with our simplest game plan. Since we're going to need our Sand Warriors to help increase our likelihood of drawing them in the mulligan, we're running the full 50 power in the spirit of the Votacombo decks of old. Maxing out on board impacting coins and waystones gives us something to do with that 50 power, besides racing to triple time. Speaking of triple time, Sand Warrior needs a full 3 time influence in order to cast, so we can't normally play it before turn 3. But the Time Sybils and Grodov Evangels help to speed us up. Spiked Helm and Borrowed Violence slightly increase the Sand Warrior clock, and Lumen Shepherd rounds out our non-power cards by giving us a free 1/1 when we draw it in order to help our Sand Warriors beat down. They're not going to do the job on their own, but maybe they can help the 3/3s get there. Looking back on the finished deck list now, this is definitely not the most optimized deck list for this kind of challenge, but as we'll see, it didn't really need to be. Loading into the game, my mulligan decisions are simple. I'm going to find a Sand Warrior, or I'm going to concede and try again. With only 4 real attacking units in the deck, starting a game without one is a recipe for disaster, so it's better off to just give up right away and try again for a better draw. This hand did have a Sand Warrior, so it wasn't time to give up just yet, but without any symbols or evangels, it was going to be slow going. My fate effects did give me a couple 1-1s to play with, but history has shown that they're definitely not enough to overcome the AI on their own. And honestly, a single Sand Warrior wasn't really either. Most of the time I was able to chip the AI low before they found enough combinations of cards to stabilize, and then I just had nothing left to finish them. This run really started ticking on the third turn when my deck delivered one of the 3 remaining Sand Warriors, which combined with Borrowed Violence gave me 2 4/3s and a 3-turn clock on the opponent. Now, I don't know the Power of Fire deck list by heart, but there's really not a lot that can kill a 4/3, so I was pretty confident going into my opponent's 4th turn, where they slammed down a Maverick Javelin and cut my clock in half. This makes it now a 5-turn clock, which was particularly frustrating, but since I can't cast any cards, there's not a whole lot that I can do. If my opponent removes my units, I'm going to lose, which is exactly what the AI did with the second Magma Javelin, and the run was over. Too busy screaming IRL to concede, my deck told me not to when it gave me one of the 2 remaining Sand Warriors in the deck, and probably my only out for actually winning. We moved on to the main strategy in these kinds of challenge runs for winning, which is attacking the opponent for small amounts of damage and hoping that they do nothing. The AI has about 50 power cards in the deck at this level, and the majority of its cards just get more power cards, so you're generally pretty safe hoping that the AI does nothing, but it's extremely nerve-wracking when all you can do is poke for a small amount of damage and hope. I played an Amethyst Waystone here, which I think was a mistake, because it gave the opponent an additional opportunity to draw a unit to block and potentially lock me out of the game, since if I can't attack, I have no way to kill the opponent. Fortunately, they were only able to put 1 blocker in play, and the extra Wisp was able to sneak through, deal the last point of damage, and help me defeat the Gauntlet without spending any power. Now, this was not the most difficult challenge run, especially given how lucky my draw was, and I probably made things a lot harder than they needed to be with some of my deck building decisions, but this is a straightforward enough starting point for the series in order to pioneer the format and lay down some of the ground rules that I will be using in future challenge runs. Thank you so much for watching, and please stay tuned for the other 2 challenge runs that I've already recorded that will be both iterating on this format and upping the difficulty significantly.